Look, Lewis Hamilton just shocked the entire world. But let's be real for a second. What actually went down in Bahrain isn't what you're seeing in the headlines. You've got to forget those flashy lap times. Seriously, ignore the social media clips that have been blowing up your feed all morning. Forget everything you thought you knew about pre-season testing, because behind the scenes, something way more important was happening. And honestly, Ferrari didn't want this story to dominate the conversation. While the rest of the paddock was obsessing over surface-level numbers, Lewis was operating on a totally different level. This wasn't about one perfect lap. It wasn't about trying to look good for the cameras or silencing the critics for 5 minutes. It was about building something quiet, methodical, and with a very specific purpose. Here's the truth. You've been looking at the wrong numbers this whole time. Bahrain testing is basically a giant maze of hidden intentions. It's a place where teams show you only what they want you to see. While everyone else was chasing clout and trying to get their sponsors on the front page, Hamilton was laying the groundwork for something massive. Something designed for Sunday trophies, not Saturday morning tweets. What you're about to hear isn't just hype or guesswork. It's the story told by raw data, long runs, and patterns that only show up when you know exactly where to look. While the world was distracted, Lewis was prepping a move that could redefine the entire 2026 season. Once you see what Ferrari and Hamilton were actually doing out there, you'll never look at those testing results the same way again. By the end of this video, you're going to realize why the championship wasn't won with a single purple sector, but in a secret 15-lap simulation that Ferrari tried their best to bury deep in the telemetry. This is the moment the signal finally separates from the noise. And if you're paying attention, the warning signs for the rest of the grid are impossible to ignore. To get why these numbers were hidden, you first have to understand the massive game of poker these teams play. In F1, the paddock is a world of illusions. Teams spend millions of dollars just to make sure their rivals are looking the wrong way. It's a game of bluffing at 200 miles per hour. When you see a car fly past with a blistering time, you aren't getting the full truth. You don't know the fuel load. You don't know the engine mapping. A car on empty tanks looks like a rocket, but a Ferrari carrying a full race load, that's the one you should actually be terrified of. This is where the sandbagging happens, and it's exactly where Lewis started to change the game. He wasn't out there to top the screens or get an ego boost. He was quietly mapping the car's DNA. While other guys were hunting for flashy headline times, Lewis was focused on fuel-corrected laps and how the car felt as the tanks got lighter. He was watching how the tyres reacted to that brutal desert heat over the long haul. He wasn't just driving. He was building a library of data so he knows exactly how that car will behave on lap 50 of a real race. This kind of prep is invisible to most people, but for a world champion, it's the only thing that matters. Ferrari wasn't trying to win testing. They were perfecting their execution. Hamilton was essentially learning the car's soul before the lights even went out for the first race. When you strip away the marketing fluff, you find a driver who isn't guessing anymore. He's building a mathematical certainty for Sunday afternoon. This is where the mask really slips. The true data reveals a story the rest of the grid was desperately hoping would stay quiet. While everyone else looked at who was fastest for 60 seconds, the real experts were watching the long runs. You see, championships aren't won by a 3-lap burst of speed. They're won by what we call repeatability. If you look at the other top teams, you see a spike and fade pattern. They're fast for a minute, then the tyres cook, and their times fall off a cliff. But Hamilton's data? It showed a flatline consistency that should have every other garage feeling very nervous. For the first time in years, it looks like Lewis is driving a car that actually speaks his language. It doesn't bite back or act weird. It just gives him a stable platform to do what he does best. We call this the pattern of 10, and it's the scariest thing a rival engineer can see on their monitor. When a driver puts 10 laps together, all within a tenth of a second, it sends a message louder than any qualifying lap. It proves the car is balanced, the driver is in total control, and the tyres are being managed with surgical precision. For Red Bull or Mercedes, seeing that rhythm is a massive red flag. It means that on race day, when the fuel is heavy and the track is scorching, Hamilton won't be fighting his car. He'll be dictating the entire race while everyone else is just trying to survive. Even the moment that looked like a failure, ended up being the ultimate proof. To most people, that late-day breakdown and red flag looked like a disaster. But if you were paying attention, it looked like total confidence. This wasn't a random accident, it was chaos by design. Ferrari wasn't playing it safe. They were running extreme margin tests to find the absolute breaking point before the real racing started. They were pushing the fuel and cooling systems to the very edge because you only do that when you're already happy with your baseline speed. When the car finally stopped, Lewis didn't look frustrated. He didn't look like a guy dealing with a broken machine. He hopped out with the calm of a scientist finishing a successful experiment. He knew the work was done. Ferrari is pushing these limits now because they finally trust the foundation they've built. They aren't just looking for reliability anymore, they're stress testing a winning platform. It's a signal that Ferrari isn't afraid of their own car anymore. And when a driver like Lewis has that kind of trust, he stops playing defense and starts looking for where to attack. That little interruption didn't kill their momentum. It confirmed it. It showed a team brave enough to find the breaking point today, so they never have to find it on a Sunday afternoon. Believe me, what happened in Bahrain did not go unnoticed. Even if no one's saying it out loud, the entire paddock felt the shift. Once the teams started crunching the race simulations, one truth kept popping up. Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton are now the benchmark. You could see it in the rival team principals too. Early in the week, they were dismissive, but by the end, that tone shifted into something much more cautious. They know that when Hamilton has a car that behaves this well over a long stint, the whole game changes. It's a lethal combo because, for the first time in forever, Lewis is working with data instead of just hope. He isn't crossing his fingers for a lucky safety car, he's using that aerodynamic stability to control the race. This gives him a level of tactical flexibility he hasn't had in years. He can attack when others have to save. He can stretch his tyre life while everyone else is sliding around. Everyone in F1 knows what happens when Lewis smells blood, and right now, the data is giving him every reason to be hungry. This wasn't a fluke. It was a controlled message sent through consistent lap times. In a sport where every millisecond counts, the fact that other teams are already looking at Hamilton as the standard tells you everything you need to know about who's actually ready for the fight. The thing fans really need to grasp is that 2026 isn't about Lewis reinventing himself. It's about a perfect alignment. He doesn't have to prove he's fast, and he definitely doesn't need to relearn how to win. He's just been waiting for a tool that lets him use the decade of experience he's got under his belt. For the first time in a long time, the link between the driver and the car is totally clean. The car does exactly what he expects, and the data backs up his instincts. When you get preparation and execution at this level, momentum becomes a freight train. Hamilton's biggest strength has never been just raw aggression, it's his brain. It's his ability to stay calm and read a race 10 laps ahead of anyone else. But those skills only matter if the car lets them shine. That's why Bahrain was such a massive turning point. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was a quiet, repeatable confidence. When a driver enters a season with this much trust in his equipment, history shows us exactly what happens next. The grid can see the shadow he's casting. The question isn't if Lewis is ready to take back the throne. The only question is if the rest of the grid is ready for what's about to hit them. In the end, Bahrain didn't give us noise. It gave us signals. Signals buried in long runs, tyre wear, and clinical execution. It showed us a team and a driver building for something way bigger than a headline. Ferrari didn't show their whole hand, but they showed enough to prove the balance of power is moving. This isn't just nostalgia or wishful thinking. It's a conclusion based on raw data and clear intent. If this foundation holds, 2026 won't be about Lewis Hamilton trying to survive. It'll be about him taking control. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think we're looking at the start of that historic 8th title, or is the Bahrain data just a clever illusion? Does the rest of the grid have an answer, or is Hamilton's consistency just too much for them this time? Drop a comment below and let's get into it. Does tyre wear or raw speed win out this year? Share this with anyone who still thinks testing is just about the fastest lap, because the real championship battle is already underway.